Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service, here today to present a gambling chart. I was actually going to do some asteroids, but I let's just put it this way. My gambling example actually did really well this week, and the chart was really pretty easy to define. So I thought it'd be much more fun to do this. So we'll put those asteroids off for a little. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you to all of the people who support this channel. I am going to show a gambling chart regarding winning tickets. So it's not the same as winning a big lottery. This would be a ticket winner. So this person actually won several times on the same day. You're going to see that. And the chart is really explicit. So I thought it would be a really, really good example for us to really dive into today. So with that said, there's one thing I do want to explain before we jump into the chart. And it came up in a conversation when I mentioned to someone I was going to be doing this today. He said, "Oh, since you can do that, can you?" The answer is no. I cannot predict. I cannot tell you when you would win. Why is that, you say? Because if you do not have winning in your original birth chart, you're not going to win. You might have a good day, but you're not going to win big. Big winners are often reflected in the natal charts. Example, they generally have very strong fifth houses. The individual that I use for an example most of the time here is somebody with a very good fifth house. I personally do not have that. I know my daughter and I were talking. She doesn't have it either. So we know better. As a matter of fact, I'm not a bad gambler. I do come out even, but I'm the type of person that once I win or once I'm a little bit ahead, I quit. So I'm not really a gambler. And this is going to be true for a lot of people. The particular chart that I'm using and the particular individual that I'm talking about not only has a really good fifth house, but this person is a regular gambler. And what I mean by that is they often buy lottery tickets. They often will be doing scratch off tickets all the time because that's just, the way they are. He wins a lot, so he breaks even. It's not like he's losing money doing this. He has a good chart. Okay? He had been going through what we call schnod, okay, which means that he went through weeks, if not months, of he didn't win anything, which is very, very unusual. I actually told him, but again, we're talking about a regular gamble, and I'll show you that when we get to the work. The other thing I want you to realize before we look at these charts, this is not a natal chart. No. I use what's called a daily chart for gambling. And that means that I take the birth information and I bring it to the day in question. And so what you're seeing are really where all the planets are. And it's basically based in the current time period, not the birth chart. But it's from the birth chart we can see whether or not it's even worth it for someone to get into gambling, or if there's even a possibility that they could be a good winner. So again, that is something that can be seen in an astrology chart. It is ruled by the fifth house. And there's a lot of stuff that comes from the eighth house as well. But a lot of times that's related to inheritances. So you got to have it in the chart. If it's not in the promise of the chart, it might not happen. So with that said, I'm going to jump in and we're going to look at this chart and get an idea of why I decided to do this today instead of talking about more asteroids, which I'll get back to, I'm sure. So let's have a look. So I'm back, and here is our chart. Okay, so just for the memory of all the charts that I've been doing, we're going to be looking at the ascendant, the ruler of the chart. We're going to look at the second house of the chart and what rules it. We're going to look at the fifth house and what rules it, okay? And in this particular case, the 8th and the 11th are both ruled by Mercury, and actually the whole Mercury thing comes out more clearly at the end. But I also think in my very limited research, because I really am new to this whole concept of gambling. I've always been a counselor through astrology, not so much a finance person, which that's also done in astrology. in this particular case, when I look at the houses in question, which are the ones I just mentioned, the ascendant, the second, the fifth, the eighth, the 11th. Okay. When you start getting into the combinations, there has to be some kind of connection to whatever it is that you're gambling. For example, I tend to be using this particular person for my most obvious example. He's easy, but he's mostly what I would call a scratch off or a ticket, or so this is not necessarily the big lottery gains or the huge financial windfalls that some people will be promised or have in their lifetime. Oh, he's done quite well. Do not get me wrong. But I like the fact that since I've been working mostly with his scratch off stuff, and I haven't done anything that's bigger yet because I have to wait for the dates. The second and I'm sorry, I'm doing the right houses here. The eighth and the 11th house to me don't appear as wow, like it would if it were somebody who just won $1 million in the lottery. Okay. Because I've looked at those also and they seem to incorporate more. Now, I'm not going to say those houses are totally without merit because they actually are both ruled by Mercury. Mercury happens to fall in the same house with the sun. And what's really cool is the sun is in the 12th house, but only by 5 minutes with Mercury. Okay. But there's a little spread there. Okay. The sun is also conjunct Apollon. He did win more than one. Okay. And Venus, which means that, yeah, there was more than one financial windfall, if you will. It was, again, they were small, but there was more than one of them. It's really cool, okay? And the chart reflects that with that Apollon, Sun, Venus. Now, here's something I can say to you all. During this time period in the Scorpion Sun, Scorpio Apollon has been around that sun probably for days, I say. Okay. Now that means that a lot of us have had Apollon sun moments. Okay. Whether it be in our daily angles, our lunar returns, but a lot of us would have this, right? But not all of us are going to win. That's what I'm referring to. He had the chart for it. So he was able to take advantage. Plus, it happened to fall right smack on the ascendant of the chart. Now, this chart, Scorpio, is a Pluto ruled. Okay. Pluto's in the third. It was in our neighborhood. It was, we were going from one location to another. Both are owned by this person. Okay. And I'm involved too. But in any event, it was in the neighborhood, which I thought was cute. It was only Pluto, and I'll get to why the change. Okay, I'll get to that in a minute. So just hold on to that. There was transformation here, but we'll get there in a second. What I thought was really cool, remember we said we have to do first, second, fifth, eighth, 11th. These are all important, okay? I go to the fifth, I go to this, all right, let's look at the second house. It's ruled by Jupiter. There's your second clue. Jupiter happens to fall in very close to the Aries point, which is cool. It was all out in public. And it happens to be in the fifth house. The other house that we really, really want to see this in. So it's so cool because you got right away the second house is ruled by Jupiter, okay? But what's really cool is the moon is here. Look at that. There's the moon. And it's really interesting because there is an aspect between the moon and Jupiter, and it is very close. Okay? So you're talking about 2857 to 2953. Slightly less than a degree. So that's a very sharp square, which then pulls the two groups together. Okay. So you're thinking, oh, it's a square. You don't think it'd be good. No, I think that the square being in those two houses kind of really pulls it together. The other thing is the very first words out of his mouth when it happened was the schneid is over. And not only is that a transformation, Pluto, because this has been going on for weeks, maybe months, and look at Chiron sitting literally about 20 minutes off of the sixth house cusp. So it's also in the fifth house. Turning points, transformations. And remember, it's a daily chart. We're only talking about one element, okay? But I also liked this. So we go here, and what rules the fifth house on that time, on that day? Neptune happens to be in conjunction to Jupiter. So it is really interesting. And and that just goes along with the rest of my story, because when he won the first tickets, he thought he was done. Here's Neptune. But there were still tickets to open. But he was so happy he won one. And then he won another one. So it was quite awesome. Okay? So to me, it was the Sun, Venus, Apollon, because it was more than one win, that happens to be shaping a transformation that occurs in the neighborhood. But what really did it for me was Jupiter ruling the second house with the moon sitting there. And how when you go to the moon, when you go to the fifth house, the moon itself is ruled by Jupiter. I'm sorry, I didn't want to skip over that. The moon itself is ruled by Jupiter, which rules the second house. I mean, it's like boom, boom. So to me, that's where the real hits are. The fact that Jupiter fell into the fifth house, I think just underlines it. Okay. Now, I did want to say how I pulled, before I end, I want to show you how I pulled in the Mercuries. Okay. So how I did that was I went to reports. You pull up the aspect list. Now, of course, the first thing you're supposed to do is look at your chart ruler, which in this case happens to be Pluto. And I'll be really honest with you, other than its connections to, I don't know, opposite, of pressure, like there's a pressure regarding changing, or, the counter to authority. I mean, I'm not really sure. It doesn't really tell me anything. I mean, I'm looking at it going like, okay, I'm not seeing much here. The parallel to Cupido makes much more sense than anything in here, only because I am his significant other. I was with him, and we were going from the home that we live in to I call it the man cave, but it's a second home. It's a cabin, and so we were involved in going from one place to another, and it's really interesting that showed up. That was accurate, okay. But other than that, I'm not really getting a whole lot from that ascendant. What really gets me is when you get up here first to Jupiter, okay, and right away, the next thing that you're seeing is this connection. This is in conjunct, this obligation type thing with Mercury. Okay, so you got a Jupiter Mercury here. All right. So not only is Jupiter ruling that second house, but then it ties in that Mercury. Mercury rules two of the important houses. Okay. I like this also, the Jupiter in conjunction to the moon. I'm not calling what they are sesquistrat and semi-square and all that. They're really all like in conjuncts is how they operate. So I tend to mess up my vocabulary and just go, oh, the heck with it, in conjunct. But that's like an obligatory. It's almost like, even the woman that he deals with when he does this, it was like, wow, finally, it was like one of those things. So it's pretty cool. And I definitely can see it there. And then that with Pluto, remember, it rules the chart. Okay. So you, Mars and the moon, but then you have this Pluto connection as well. Okay. So you almost have to look at the aspects to pull in the Mercury concept. I did think that the most important part of the chart, in my opinion, and you could see it by the amount of aspects, was Venus. that Venus really did tie everything together. Look at all this: parallels the sun, conjuncts the sun. Um, I like the trine to Astrea too because we're hoping it continues, and it was more than one. So I really it was four actually. So it was really quite the it was quite wow. Okay, um, it's interesting because Venus is opposite the North Node, which is interesting, but Venus is at the ascendant, and the North Node was the seventh. So that's pretty cool because there were other people involved, not just me, but the person who sold it to him. And I like this, it's conjuncting Apollon. It was more than one. So Venus actually makes some of the best aspects in this chart. Jupiter is not a slacker, but I think that the chart is very dominated by the sun, the moon, and Venus, but really the sun and Venus. And the sun and Venus were the first things that I showed you in this chart. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that we gained something from this experience. I know I'm learning, and I'm taking you along with me. He wants me to learn more about this. I'm a counseling astrologer. I'm not that great at the financial stuff, but I'm learning. What can I say? So thank you once again for watching the video. Until I see you or meet you again, until we have something else to say, I wish you all only happy reading.